Hello everybody, this is JJstarter here, ready to continue our Star Wars fanfiction. Alright, you guys remember where we left off? We just left off with Revan seeing Trask's ghost having a conversation. Here we go. On the other hand, peace, as in sleep, did not come easily for Revan. He laid shirtless under the warm blanket he and Bastila were sharing. Staring at the stars above, Revan was not in any hurry to sleep, though. His fragmented memories pieced themselves together faster when he did, and his nights were filled with dark nightmares and the horrible grinning skulls of those he had killed. The fire had died down to glowing embers. Mission and Zolbar lay snoring beside it. Careful not to wake Bastila, Revan stood up and walked to the glowing embers. Sitting on a folding chair, he began poking the embers with a metal pole. The sound of snapping twigs at the forest edge immediately set his senses on high alert. Tiptoeing to a table, he retrieved his tunic and utility belt. Unclipping one of the lightsabers hooked on the belt, he cautiously walked to the source of the sound. Upon nearing the forest edge, he noticed the faint glow of Glowlam and a familiar presence of Jolee Bindo in the Force. The old Padawan was sitting in a clearing not too far from the edge of the forest, his rumpled Padawan robes covered in mud, leaves and twigs. He stared up at the sky as if searching for something. "Got something on your mind?" Jolee asked, never even turning his head. Revan walked into the clearing and sat beside Jolee. Jolee resumed his silence. This time with Revan. "You fought Exar Kun," Revan said. "After a while, Ulic Q'adroma fell to the dark side after infiltrating the Krath, yet he was redeemed." He paused for a moment. "The galaxy never really forgave him, though." Jolee was silent for a moment. Picking up two blades of grass, he began threading them through. The wars against Freedom Nad, the Krath, Ulic, Exar Kun were dark times. Nobody trusted anyone entirely. Ulic wasn't evil. He didn't start out evil. But he just was subdued by the dark side like so many others. He added several more blades of grass to his weaving. "I was evil, yet I did not start out that way," Revan murmured. Remembering a long, long time ago, he remembered a young Padawan and his master, Aaron Kane and Kreia, and so many others. "I wasn't like Ulic, seduced by the greater Sith. I instigated the civil war, causing deaths of millions. Remember I told you about my friend, Nomisuri, Sunrider?" Jolee continued. Revan nodded. "Her daughter, Vima, was one of the masters to train the Jedi exile during the Mandalorian Wars." He remembered. Jolee nodded. Not an agreement, but as a nod to his friend's legacy. Nomi fell in love with Ulic during the Great Sith Wars. She formed a bond with him, despite all her love for him. The minute he killed Kay, she all but her love for him. What? Hold on. Despite all her love for him, the minute he killed Kay, she all but her love for him. It was like she loved him like a dead lover. Oh, she still loved him, but she couldn't handle it. Okay. She cut Ulic off from the Force permanently without hesitation, and she paid for her actions dearly. He turned his head towards Revan. Not once in my friendship with Nomi did she stop grieving over Ulic, even though he redeemed himself, but she still felt unimaginable guilt. His death on Renvar did not did little to aid that guilt. Naomi was a changed woman after the wars, he continued, threading several more blades of grass into the creation. A green tunic-like form was taking shape. The loss of Andar, Ulik, and all of the Jedi artifact affected her deeply. Even as a Grandmaster did she spend hours on end staring into the empty space, mourning Andar and Ulik. Don't think that I didn't see a pattern in your questions, Jolie noted. You're troubled by something. You shouldn't be. The Dark Lord of the Sith is vanquished, and only Meo Antilles remains. I don't know if I pronounced that wrong. Sorry. Revan stood up, pacing back and forth. Words began rolling unchecked from his mouth. Ulik had a bond with Naomi. I have a bond with Bastila. He was seduced by the dark side of the Force, so was I. Naomi had to leave all her love for Ulik aside and do the worst thing that could ever happen to him. Would Bastila have the courage to do that to me? That's not what's bothering you, Jolie said. Revan gritted his teeth. Fine, he said finally. My memories are coming back. Every night, I see the faces of those I killed in my dreams. It's like punishment for all I have done in the galaxy, and now I keep on dreaming even greater threats. It's driving me mad. Jolie smiled. Standing up, he pressed his finished creation into Revan's hand and said kindly, You're the prodigal knight. Consistent paranoia is what makes you unique, as well as having the tendency to drive old men crazy sometimes. With that, the two friends walked back to camp. Bastila awoke, feeling the blanket shifting over her. She sensed Revan getting under the thick quilt. What was he doing up at this hour? She thought drowsily. But her eyes closed again, and she drifted off into the dark oblivion of sleep. She was awakened a few hours later by an alarming noise coming from her lover, calling a sheet over to her with the Force. She wrapped her naked body in it, stood up. Revan was thrashing about in his sleep, making odd grunting noises. What was terrifying was although he was deep asleep, his eyes were wide open, a shade of yellow. Suddenly he began screeching at the top of his lungs. A roar signaled a giant Wookiee's awakening. While Mission leaped up, Zalbar had already lifted Revan like a small toy in his arms and was carrying him towards the Evanhawk. HK and T3 sped down the ramp, T3 screeching his own noises in panic and fear for his master. Statement. My audio receptors had picked up the human noises, identified the sounds as distress. Shock statement. It is my master. Oh, what have the meatbags done to you? Zalbar groaned in helplessness as he carried Revan aboard the ship ramp into the ship. Jolie was waiting in the medical bay, preparing hypno needle in the lab station. Zalbar set Revan down on the bed. As he and Mission restrained Revan, Jolie injected his arm with the hypo. Revan stopped screaming, much to everyone's relief, shuddered, and drifted into unconsciousness. Heavily breathing, Jolie turned to Bastila, who was standing in the door. Miss Shawn, I would put on some clothes if I were you, he suggested, nodding at the sheet wrap around her. Of course, Bastila murmured, staring at Revan before turning around and disappearing behind a corridor. Her mind raced. Revan had complained bad dreams, but they had always stayed in his mind. The dreams certainly did not turn one's eyes yellow, the color of a Sith. Carr stood in the Evanhawk communication room, activating the console. He sighed. Turning to the small droid behind him, he said, "Ready when you are, T3." T3 gave a blurp in response and activated his holo transmitter. 3D image flickered, and then a form of Admiral Dodonna. Carth. I was just about to calm you, Adana said, her face a mask of grave concern. We are about to do the same, Admiral, Karth replied. The Jedi Council here on Coruscant have told me they are receiving, how do I put this, tremors in the Force. I assume the Prodigal Knight has been experiencing something as well. A nod from Karth was all she needed to know. Admiral Dodonna knew not to intrude upon something that was no business of hers. Karth immediately began explaining the last few days' events. We're leaving, Karth said bluntly to the assembled crew. What? Mission exclaimed. I was going to get a nice tan, maybe make some friends with the locals, check out cool blades, and hey, it's all bar, cuffed over her head. There's a time and a place, he said. Karth is serious. This had something to do with my life-deaded master. The Jedi on Coruscant are experiencing things. Revan's not the only one. Our orders are to return to Coruscant as soon as possible. No exceptions, Karth sighed. The crew grumbled and headed back to their duties. Walking into the cockpit, Karth found Revan strapped into one of the two seats behind the pilot's chair, still shaken from the previous night's events. Bastila was already seated in the co-pilot chair, and Jolee was seated in the navigation chair. I plotted a course to Coruscant, Bastila informed Karth as he sat down. We should be there in an hour or so. The freighter Ebon Hawk emitted a loud hum as it lifted off Rakata Prime and disappeared into the void of hyperspace. As the island trail began to drift away, a black battle cursor, almost invisible against the stars, jumped into hyperspace, beginning a dangerous game of cat and mouse. We've got something strange here, Mission said frantically from the seat next to Revan. She was observing their trajectory when she began noticing something odd. Take us out of hyperspace, Karth ordered. The Ebon Hawk slowed to real space in the outer rim, traveling towards Coruscant, but with sublight engines. We're in the Allura sector, Bastila commented as the crew unbuckled. The cockpit crew gathered around Mission. I've been monitoring our energy fields as we've been traveling through hyperspace. I noticed something odd, which the scanners identified as nothing. Our energy field is releasing energy that's traveling outworld almost indefinitely. Unless it hits something like a planet magnetic field where it disappears after bouncing off the upper atmosphere. While we were in hyperspace, I noticed that the energy output was being disrupted at a significant point. Scanners aren't picking up anything, Jolee noted. Could be an asteroid, Karth suggested. Or a ship, Revan murmured. Staring out the cockpit window, there illuminated against the bright glow of the thousands of expanding region suns, was a jet-black frigate. Revan could make out a bridge tower and several long-range heavy turbo-laser batteries. Resembling a U laid flat with a command bridge jutting out of the middle and the sides shaped like one long pincer, it looked for all the world like some creature of the night. Alright guys, that's where I'm going to end today. It's a little bit longer, we're only 3 minutes longer. I hope you guys are enjoying the story. I know there's not many of us right now. Leave a comment below. Let me know how you think I'm doing. Let me know if you have any advice for me. And yeah, let me know. See you guys.